there, friends. It's Carly, and welcome back. So glad to have you here. This is my first attempt at something a little different. I have done astrological deep dives into public figures before on my channel. I've done Elizabeth Holmes, I've done Aaron Rodgers, two random ass people that I've chosen. And the next one that I want to talk about is Betty White. She is someone that, as I started doing the celebrity deep dives, she has just been right here the whole entire time, and I was going to make a tribute to her for her birthday, and then she passed away on December 31st, 2021. R.I.P. Betty. No, you're in a very, very good place and looking down on all of us, and apparently tapping me on the shoulder to make this video, because apparently there's something in here that somebody needs to hear, and we're going to talk about Betty's natal chart. The reason that this is different from ones that I've done in the past, and you can tell this is a much shorter video than the deep dives, the truly deep dives that I've done, especially the Aaron Rodgers one. It's almost 3 hours long because, man, I really got into some stuff and it was fun. That's long. There's a lot to it. I think it's worth watching. But this one, I want to try something kind of on the opposite end of that spectrum where for once in my life, I'm not trying to teach everybody everything. I'm just hitting on some high points, some interesting things, some food for thought, some nudges that say, I wonder if I have that in my chart. I wonder what sign my moon is in. What rising sign do I have? I want to spark a little curiosity. So I'm hoping that maybe a shorter format, more people are feeling comfortable approaching that. And that ultimately the goal is to spark curiosity back to your own energy and your own natal chart and see if any of this gets your juices flowing to want to get to know yourself better. So if you're brand new to natal charts, there is a link in the description box to a site called Cafe Astrology. I'm going to put astro.com on there too. I'll also put my video in the description that's like a 10-minute thing on how to get your natal chart for free, because if you think you need to pay for it, no, you do not. It is totally free. You have access to it. You can pull your chart, and then with a little bit of understanding what you're looking at, you can also do a good huge chunk of research into yourself and your own unique astrology just by learning how to Google the right thing and then read what Google tells you. So learning astrology is so much easier maybe than some things make it look. I know when you first look at a natal chart, it is a gigantic cluster. And so in this video, we're going to take Betty's and use it just as an example. Just keep that in mind though, that even if you've never seen your own personal natal chart, I would highly recommend going and pulling it. Cafe Astrology especially is really nice for beginners because it gives you a 20-page report that breaks it down in words and tells you, what does it mean that your moon is in Virgo? What does it mean that you have a Leo rising? What does that even mean? So it gives you a couple paragraphs. It also gives you the headers then in that report where you can go Google whatever you're wanting to learn more about. If it's giving you a paragraph about your Virgo moon, and you're like, whoa, that is describing everything about my whole life ever, and I want to learn more about my Virgo moon, all you got to do is Google Virgo moon. So you're right there, easy peasy. So without further ado, we are going to dive into Betty's chart and pick out, like I said, pick out a few things, because as we look at it, we see there's a lot going on in everybody's chart. Everyone's energy is so unique. And even in the Aaron Rodgers video, I spent almost 3 hours, and you're still not ever going to be able to talk about everything. So I am no longer reaching for being able to talk about everything. Okay, so without further ado, we are going to look at Betty's natal chart. When we start with someone's chart, when we're brand new looking at somebody's chart, the first few things that I look for are the big three. So the sun, the moon, and the rising sign. So in this case, Betty's sun is at 27 degrees Capricorn. Her moon is at 28 degrees Virgo, and she is a Leo rising. Her rising sign's at 19 degrees. So her big three are Capricorn, Virgo, and Leo. And right off the bat, I want to say some things about Earth energy. And she's got not just Capricorn Sun, she's also got a Capricorn Venus and Capricorn Vertex. So she's got a lot of Earth energy, plus you add in her midheaven is in Taurus, that MC line at the top of the chart, that's our midheaven. So she has a lot of Earth energy, those three Earth signs, Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. So the light side of Earth energy is that you can be incredibly effective and prolific at creating things in the physical world. So actually implementing changes, creating projects, the amount of follow through. It's really fun. The Earth family works as a unit. So Capricorn, Virgo, and Taurus, they don't do the same thing, and yet they're all Earth signs. So they share this practicality, this responsibility, this groundedness in the physical plane. And they each have their own function within the Earth family. So like she's got the Capricorn sun plus a couple other things, the Virgo moon and the Taurus midheaven. So she's got some of all of it. So when you look at the three of them, Taurus is our very first entry into the Earth family. And it is our ability to know our own physical worth. It is our ability to feel secure inside of the physical world. It's our animal instincts that are able to know just exactly what we need to get ourselves comfortable and take good care of ourselves and to keep ourselves safe and secure. Taurus is where we're able to connect with that primal part of ourselves enough to be able to hear our animal instincts and to know what we need to do to take good care of ourselves and our own security. So obviously that's very important. So if you feel insecure on the inside, chances are there's something going on in your Taurus energy that we could take a look at and see, what shadow is in there that's maybe wanting to be healed and released. So that's Taurus, is animal instincts and knowing what's right for us. Virgo, on the other hand, is extremely detail oriented. Virgo, in its highest frequency, is exceptional at attention to detail and getting the details right. I also meant to mention with Taurus, the patience to do follow through. Like basically the patience that says, I don't need everything to be done right this minute because I know that I'm making steady incremental effort towards the thing that I want. And as long as I know I'm moving in the right direction, it can take years for me to get there. And I have the patience to continue to head in the direction of what I know is right for me. So that's Taurus. You add in Virgo. Virgo is like the technical details. Like Virgo has so many delicious facets. Virgo's heart is of service. That's like the main thing that you need to know about Virgo. And Virgo's Earth energy, I think why I'm starting here in general is because like Virgos, Capricorns, Tauruses, even Earth energy in general, they get a bad rap for being boring, for being stubborn, for being controlling, or like nitpicky about the details, Virgo. All of those things that like, pretty much every single zodiac sign can catch a lot of hate out in the world. But the Earth family, man, like they definitely get a lot of grief out there. But at the same time, these are the people who, this is the side of our energy that lets us create something from start to finish, like have an idea inside of our mind and take it and create it in the physical world. So it is an absolute necessary set of energy. There's a reason we all possess all 12 of the zodiac energies and all 4 elements is because that Earth energy, it lets us create things in the physical world. So Virgo, what it really wants is to be of service, to be capable of whatever technical skills are needed to be of service to the community, the collective that they are serving. That is very much how Virgo's mind operates. When you're in your Virgo space, you care about getting the details right. The shadow side of Virgo is that you can actually like drive yourself insane caring about getting the details right. You can have anxiety and OCD type tendencies and all kinds of compulsions because you are a little too concerned about getting the details right. And so that's where that's Virgo's headspace, is like details. How do I take, it's like the bridge between Capricorn and Taurus, where Capricorn then, as you add that into the mix, Capricorn is more holding of the vision. Capricorn is the part of you that can see yourself standing on top of the mountain that you haven't climbed yet, but you know that it's worth climbing up there because you can see, And so that's basically to say that Capricorn is extremely goal oriented, like they are high achieving, and Capricorn suns, especially like what Betty was, but really we all have that Capricorn side to our personality where basically we have a vision in our mind for what we want our physical experience to look like. And that can be something like, your dream home, if it's, very personal and just like you centric. It could be a community center, something that you want to create for the community at large. It's any kind of vision that you have in your mind for something that doesn't exist yet and you want to bring it to life in the physical world. That's Capricorn. And then that's why Capricorn needs Virgo, because Virgo's the one that's got the details figured out. And that's also why Capricorn especially needs Taurus, because Capricorn, if left unchecked, can get really dark. Every single zodiac energy has its own dark shadows, dark side to it. And with Capricorn is a machine in terms of accomplishing the vision that they have in their mind. And there's a evolutionary astrologer that I really like named Stephen Forrest. And in one of his books, he wrote Capricorn is 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration. And if Capricorn holds on to that 1% inspiration, then everything that they're creating in the physical world is about that inspiration, whatever that was. And typically our inspiration is like tying us back into the collective. Like when we follow our inspiration, we're doing things that matter, that are, helping to build a better world for all of us to get to live in. And when Capricorn loses track of their 1% inspiration, Capricorn can be a little too concerned about getting to the top of the mountain, no matter what the cost. They'll step on anybody that they need to step on to get to the top of the mountain because other people don't matter as much as the goal. The goal is what's ultimately most important. And this is all to kind of like paint this picture of, this Earth family that is very prevalent in Betty's chart. I think I can say that because the woman worked up until like nearly the end of her life. I mean, I understand from coverage that she has been more confined at home and not doing as much during the pandemic. So like the last couple years. But before that, I mean, she was going all the time. She's doing all the things. She's got a schedule that is longer than her arm. And she's like 80s, early 90s, still working like this. Like that's Earth energy. That's like a need, like almost a compulsion to make something in the physical. So she had that in spades. And I think we saw that her career was extremely prolific. Like from very early on, she was doing this and then she's doing this. And a lot of times she's doing multiple projects at once. She was able to create a lot of material to leave behind for herself. And that speaks to what Earth energy is capable of. That there can be things left behind after your physical vessel is expired and you're no longer in this life. There's a whole legacy behind you of things that you created in the physical that other people can now still interact with, separate from your physical being. So again, Earth energy, so powerful inside of all of us. And Betty, between her Capricorn sun and other planets, and her Virgo moon, her Taurus midheaven, she definitely is a great example of the beauty and the magnitude of what's possible with, a good dose of Earth energy in a chart. So the next few things that I'm going to point out are what's called aspect patterns. And this is going above and beyond just what sign each planet is in, what house each planet is in. And it's more getting to the conversation between the planets. So For example, the first one I'm going to point out is her water grand trine, and that is between her Uranus in Pisces, trines her Pluto in Cancer, trines her Mars in Scorpio, trines her Uranus in Pisces. So we're back to the beginning. So when it makes a complete triangle like that, that is a grand trine. To have a grand trine is not like rare, but it's definitely something that when you have it in a chart, it's worth talking about. And when you have a water grand trine specifically, the potential for creativity is deep and vast. We're also going to just briefly mention, I'm not going to get into what this means, but I am going to show you because it does change the impact of the grand trine. Her grand trine is part of a kite. So when we're talking about a kite, we have a grand trine like what I just showed you. And then you also have these pieces where her Uranus in Pisces is sextiling up to her Taurus midheaven, which is also sextiling her Pluto in Cancer. And then it's kind of hard to see because it's so close, but from her Taurus midheaven, opposite, you follow this red line all the way down to the bottom, is her Mars in Scorpio. So that is her kite. So a kite is a slightly different feeling configuration than just a grand trine itself. When you have a grand trine, it is balancing. It's incredibly powerful in terms of whatever element the grand trine exists in. In her case, it's a water grand trine. But when you have the grand trine all by itself, there can almost be like a complacency. Like you can get stuck bouncing inside of that grand trine, like just over and over and over again, and not further expand out into the rest of your energy field. And when you have a kite, like what she has, when you have these extra components where you have this bottom triangle then, and the opposition, especially the opposition, pushes you outside the grand trine. So all of that to say that you are much more likely to use the grand trine to its highest potential. If you have a kite, you're more likely to just realize this. And you do that because it is a much more tense aspect. Having the opposition involved and the other point that creates the bottom part of the kite, it pushes you outside of your comfort zone all the time. And because of that, you're uncomfortable. There's tension inside of you. And because of that tension, you get really familiar and acquainted with your energy. So eventually, otherwise, it can be a really, really rough ride. We either adapt or die kind of thing. So as you live with tense energy, you learn how to make the most of all of the different sides of who you are that is creating the tension. And that's one thing that I'll say about Betty's chart is that there is an incredible amount of tension. There is an incredible amount of psychological and like just depth of emotion that I do feel like what we saw from her, that it does did. She still feels so present tense to me. But anyway, so I feel like her water energy drove her work and drove her ability to do what she did, especially in terms of improv. Like that's one thing that they always said about her is that she's so quick-witted. And when you look at her early career, especially where she was kind of on a daily, like all day long kind of show, like there's not a script for that. There's not there's maybe a little bit of a framework of what we're going to do with all those hours. But for the most part, she's just like filling in the space. And her water energy, water as a family is about intuition, healing ourselves, healing others, regeneration of our spirit. The highest frequency of water energy is the ability to learn from our pain and move beyond it. So, it's so easy to just get caught in our pain and our grief and our traumas and all of that. In our water energy space, we use those water energy signs, those tools, to work with the experience that happened that wounded us and to get what we can out of it, to integrate that into ourselves and then shed anything that isn't that and leave it behind us, transcend the pain of what happened to us and use it for something good. And that's where I'll drop in this little bit. And this is something that I mostly put it in here for like everybody watching, again, going back to your own natal chart. But her midheaven is in Taurus, which means her IC is in Scorpio. Her IC is that bottom part of the chart. It always starts the fourth house. It's like the basement of your soul. Like you don't let anybody in to this part of who you are unless they are extremely close to you and you trust them and you allow them into this space. It's a very conscious choice. So the fourth house typically represents like home, and home is an idea that I spend a lot of time thinking about, that it's not a physical dwelling. It's something that exists inside of us. It's our ability to feel at home, which is to say our ability to feel emotionally secure, like we're in a space where our innermost self is safe. So that is very much what the fourth house is all about, like your innermost self getting nurtured and having what it needs. And when you have the IC in Scorpio, so for all of you risings, for all of you Taurus midheavens out there, you all have the beginning of your fourth house in Scorpio. You all have that IC in Scorpio. She also has her Mars in Scorpio, which is part of that water grand trine and creating the opposition inside of her kite. She in a documentary that I watched, and this is my only experience with her childhood, because this is what this energy is pointing towards, is like kind of how was your childhood? How did it go? And she has reported that she had a very nice childhood. I think she was an only child, and her parents were very loving and very generous and taught her lots of things. And she just had this wonderful experience. And that's very interesting to me. And I wonder, how this fits with that. And, you know, if anybody knows, like, or there's resources or anything out there that you have that you can share in the comments, please do. Because a Scorpio IC is said to be like one of the most painful childhoods. And that basically like that Scorpio energy connected to that IC point in your chart, what it means is that like your childhood is scorpionic, and scorpionic is being with and sitting with the full range of human emotion, the positive, the negative. And so when you see a Scorpio IC, it's like your childhood provoked both like the best of humankind and the worst of humankind. So I do wonder how that showed up for her, because of course, like this is just the textbook version, but I've talked to enough Taurus midheavens to understand that like typically there's trauma in the childhood. So I do wonder about that. That's neither here nor there. The next couple things that we're going to look at are what are called grand crosses. And a grand cross in a chart is extremely rare, and Betty has several. So she also has what another very rare aspect called a mystic rectangle. And so that's highlighted here on the screen. And this is another extremely rare aspect, and she has that too. So there's just so much meat on the bone as far as like we could dig and dig and dig into her chart. But these grand crosses, I did want to talk about that because I think it's fascinating that she's got two sets. Like not only does she have multiple of them, like as in there are multiple crosses being made in this chart, but she also has multiple cardinal grand crosses, meaning the 4 planets included are in the cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. She also has a few fixed grand crosses, meaning the planets involved in that are happening in the fixed signs, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. So yeah, like weird, like so not surprising, I would say, that she has like lived the life that she did and made such a monumental impact on modern society and culture in general. Like, whether you grew up watching Golden Girls or you grew up with her like in the 50s and 60s, like when she very first started being on TV, like, I mean, you could have been born like all the way back to 1950 and still grew up watching Betty White on TV. Like, that's just an insane amount of impact to have. And so when you think about the life that she's lived and then you look at these grand crosses, I feel like there's such a magical connection between them. And so I'm going to read, just because this is kind of where I get my technical information. These links are in the bottom. Grand Cross. One of the most prominent configurations is the Grand Cross. It is also called a grand square because it involves 4 signs, 4 planets, 4 houses, and 4 areas of life that are connected together. Not only are there 4 squares in the Grand Cross, there are also 2 oppositions. Essentially, a grand cross consists of 4 planets in the same mode or quality, meaning cardinal, fixed, or mutable. And like we said, she's got cardinal ones and she's got fixed ones, which form the 4 squares and 2 oppositions. A true grand cross includes a planetary placement in each element: fire, earth, air, or water. Because the Grand Cross involves a combination of squares and oppositions, it is an aspect pattern that affects action and drive, as well as perspective and balance with others. A Grand Cross is characterized by the mode, and each Grand Cross has its own unique expression and interpretation. However, one factor that each type of Grand Cross shares is that they are all fundamentally stressful configurations. Squares motivate action, and they are perceived as uncomfortable influences. So that means any square, any of these red lines that you have, or oppositions, the longer red line through the middle, any of those, that basically they're stressful and they create that tension inside of you where you feel like you're being pulled in 2 opposite directions. A Grand Cross is like that on steroids, because you have 2 oppositions and 4 squares all included in the same connected piece of energy. And like I said, she's got multiple of those. So yeah, for how put together she was on the outside and how graceful and sweet and present and all of these things, it is incredible to see the inner workings of her energy and see the nearly chaotic energy that she was carrying and how serene the waters were on the top. And I gotta think like her work ethic kind of proves like that inner working of that energy, that she was very restless and had to keep herself going. The tension develops over time, and once it reaches a certain point, we take action to reduce some of the pressure. Depending on our actions and reactions, squares can be both constructive and destructive. So again, that just kind of depends on where you're at in your overall energy and what else is going on in your chart. And again, I think Betty is an exceptional look into how productive these types of tense aspects can be. Like an opposition or a square, like a lot of those are like the most painful aspect or the hardest aspect to have in astrology. And that kind of gets off into this territory of like there's good energy and there's bad energy. And Betty is a beautiful example of what you can do with your tense energy if you channel it into something productive. The productive factor to a Grand Cross is that it does offer a solid foundation, a nucleus with structure and strength that can be a tremendous resource. However, finding the point of assimilation and balance in order to be able to take advantage of this gift can be exceedingly challenging. Betty made it look easy. That doesn't mean that it is. The key, of course, comes from developing balance between the 2 oppositions. When the opposing influences are balanced, then they are wielding the same amount of force on the planets that are connected by the square aspects, creating a solid foundation. When the oppositions are out of balance, too much attention being directed to one influence over the other, the structure cannot hold up and the squares equal frustration, and they take center stage again. Taking the time to focus in on the basis issue of each mode, cardinal signs impact identity, fixed signs impact self-worth, and mutable signs impact healing and reasoning, can also discover the commonality that the 4 signs of the Grand Cross have. So I'm also going to read you the paragraphs for cardinal and fixed. So cardinal signs are typically focused with the question of self and identity, as well as actions surrounding these. The focus gets directed based on whether the individual has the ability to impulsively express the self, that's Aries. The emotional identity is nurtured, that's Cancer. The social and intellectual identity is connected, that's Libra. Or the tangible manifestation of our identity is recognized, that's Capricorn. In essence, the cardinal cross could become a crisis of identity. The 4 planets involved are each pushing to express the facet of the self, yet each operates from a different level and perspective of the self. Cardinal signs encourage action, initiation, and sometimes impulsivity. The test with a cardinal grand cross is reflected whenever there is a transiting aspect to it. That is when all 4 of the placement's energies try to competitively spring into action simultaneously and each in its own direction. Remember this because we're going to talk about transits to her grand crosses to wrap up here in just a second. When transits come to your cardinal grand cross, this can cause the individual to feel overstretched or being pulled apart. The influence can also cause frustration based on the desire to take action without a sense of focus or direction. The action or reaction lacks an outlet. Remembering that the key when dealing with the cardinal grand cross is to be alert to the stressors and how those stressors relate to one's identity. Maintaining a sense of focus on the prize while acknowledging that there is an action needed in order to express the self and uniqueness of the self makes it less difficult to make decisions. So basically, that I think really sums up her drive, especially when you look earlier in her career, just because she was coming onto TV where there weren't women on TV at that time unless they were playing the role of housewife. That was like the only role for women on TV in that era. It's hard to even imagine. So like her wanting to create something that had never been created. The fact that it didn't exist before didn't slow her down. She's got mostly cardinal energy, including these multiple cardinal grand crosses. So she also has a fixed grand cross, which does not function the same as the cardinal grand cross. So the fixed signs are focused on the questions of self-worth. The focus gets directed based on whether the individual has the ability to acknowledge the worth of the self and mastery, that's Taurus, acknowledge their creativity and spirit, that's Leo, acknowledge their vulnerability and trust, that's Scorpio, and acknowledge their humanity and brotherhood, that's Aquarius. The main purpose of the fixed signs is to uphold and maintain the activity that the cardinal signs created and initiated. The fixed signs are not ready to move from the course of action taken and may resist any efforts to implement change. When the fixed cross is activated by transiting aspects, the tendency is for the 4 planets to hold their course and resist outside pressures for change. Resistance seems to be the main energy of the fixed cross in an effort to carry on or maintain homeostasis, rather than flow with an energy that might change the course. On the other hand, when the fixed cross individual does initiate action, it can be exceedingly difficult to stop the momentum. The fixed cross is like a locomotive, slow to start, but once in motion, stays on track and is exceedingly difficult to stop until it has run its course. The self-worth of the fixed grand cross develops unconsciously, for better or for worse. The value that the individual has of the self will be exhibited in their self-esteem. The challenge for the individual with a fixed grand cross is to find the ability to allow flexibility into their activities and to share their accomplishments with others. So this, I feel like when you look at both her cardinal grand cross and her fixed grand cross, it's like not only did she want to create this, she had this in her mind that this is my sense of self and here's how I need to express it to the world. She also had that staying power of the fixed grand cross supporting. It's like one foundation that says I'm going to be really good at creating stuff, and then another foundation that says I'm going to be really good at hanging in there until I'm done creating my stuff. Now we're going to wrap up with the transits to her chart on the day of her death, on the day of her passing, her transition into non-physical, back into non-physical. These are the transits on the day of her passing. Obviously, like everything else, we're not going to go through everything. If you want to do some Googling of your own, that it could be very helpful and valuable. But I will point out a few. One that I think is especially interesting, and this is because this planet is moving so quickly, is the sun. And obviously that's not even a planet, it's a luminary. It's the biggest star in our solar system. So the sun, it moves about 1 degree a day. And yet on the day of her passing, December 31st, 2021, the sun is sitting on her vertex, and vertexes, it's a point in your natal chart where when you have transits to it, it's an opening for your existence. It's like life is bigger than it was before. You're no longer being held back by the things that were stopping you before. And so for the sun, this bright light, this like illumination of our own personal life force coming over her vertex on the day of her passing, it just gives me this sense of like being set free into this bigger landscape, this bigger terrain that she's ready to fly in that bigger space. The other one that I want to point out is Uranus in Taurus on the day of her passing is sitting on her midheaven. And that one, it definitely was there for longer. Like this sun one, like she passed on the day, like it's only 1 day long. And that was the day that she passed. So that's really interesting to me. The Uranus on the midheaven, Uranus moves so slowly. So it takes months for it to cover 1 degree point. So this Uranus on the midheaven, like it's been there for a while. So on the day of her passing, the sun was transiting, making an aspect, lighting up her cardinal grand cross. So like, what is it that she's wanting to create more? And who is herself and how does she want to express herself? The sun is lighting up this cardinal grand cross. And the Uranus, like we talked about, has been sitting on her midheaven for at least a little while. And so that has been going on for longer, but that's also lighting up that fixed grand cross where when you put pressure on it, especially Uranus, where Uranus is responsible for sudden changes that like break us free of things that are limiting us so that we can move forward and make whatever it is that we're supposed to make. Uranus on that fixed grand cross, it's like, it almost feels like the only way to slow the momentum. Like it said, once you get the fixed grand cross momentum going, it's like nearly impossible to stop. There's so much force behind it. It's like Uranus just kind of, it just popped it apart. And she is free now. Like that just the amount of tension inside her chart has me thinking like, wow, like normally when you see that much tension in a chart, and this is me speaking from like the charts that I've analyzed over my time of doing this, which is not very long, but I would say it's way more common to come across someone who's carrying that much tension and is struggling mentally versus someone who's carrying that much tension and is using it to make and leave behind this like massive pile of creations that she did like all the way up into her last decades on this planet. So she is a beautiful example, so perfect for this first time trying out this smaller format where we just pick out some of the bigger themes in her chart and talk about a couple of them. If you guys have questions about her chart, feel free to leave those in the comments. I'll do my best to answer or point you towards an article or something. Yeah. And that lets me know for future ones of these. Also tell me if there's somebody that you'd like to see me do one of these shorter natal chart analysis for. leave those in the comments. So many things. Leave all the things in the comments. Do the things where you leave the comments, you like the video, you subscribe to my channel, all of that good stuff helps me out, helps out the creators that you like when you give those little nudges to their content on YouTube. So thank you so much for joining me, for hanging out with me for a little while today. I hope you've learned something. I hope more than that there's been a spark of curiosity towards your own personal natal chart. Don't forget, those links are in the description if you need help pulling yours. So until next time, dear friends, you take such good care of yourselves, and so will I.